Hello everybody. Today we're going to do something a bit different. Usually my videos are, I don't know, there's some music and I'll show you stuff. I thought that today I'm going to show you my favorite approach, which is into Queenstown in New Zealand. I actually spent some time in Queenstown and watched aircraft take off and land and was really impressed. So I tried to recreate this in FSX since I'm not flying in New Zealand in the real world, and yeah, I really enjoyed. Some of you have been subscribed to my channel for quite some time, and I haven't produced many videos recently. I'm sorry about that, but the truth is real world flying has really taken over and I don't really have that much time to fly in FSX. If I do end up flying a simulator, it's usually a big level D sim, and there's a nasty guy at the back putting me through my paces. So flight sim flying is not really what it used to be. It's more testing my skills and ensuring I'm still up to scratch. Nevertheless, once in a while I still get the time to fire up good old FSX and play around a bit. So before, as you can see, we are approaching top of descent. Before we start the approach, let's take a look at the chart. Right, let's take a look at the charts. First thing we notice is that there's a lot of high terrain about, and that our flight path will take us underneath the terrain, meaning that we'll actually be flying in between the mountains. Second thing is that the approach path is actually really steep. So if you would fly this like a normal approach at flaps 5 speed 180 and then to slow down towards the end, this is not going to work because the approach path is so steep that at the end you're not going to be able to bleed off that speed unless you level off and then you miss the runway. So what you need to do is slow down a bit early. There's a waypoint called ATVUP. 6,700 feet is the altitude restriction, and by that point I personally will be at flaps 15 speed 160 gear down, and that will give you a bit more time and cause enough drag to slow down nicely further down the line. Now if we look at the chart, you'll see that each waypoint has an altitude restriction which is underlined. That means that this is a minimum altitude at which we should be at each waypoint. Now this is important because sometimes you'll see that there's a line below and above, and that means you need to be at that altitude. Now in this case we can actually be slightly above, and this works in our favor. Because if you would type all of this into the FMS, which is what I've done, and then use LNAV VNAV to fly that approach, what would happen is the aircraft would put the engines into idle and try to hit that altitude at that particular point. So it would level off, put the power back on, then overfly at that altitude, then go back into idle, start descending again, and so on and so forth. So what you end up is sort of a step approach, which is not what we want. It's not efficient, and of course it's not very comfortable for the passengers in the back. So here's what I would do. Personally, I would let the aircraft do the lateral navigation, and I would do the vertical navigation with the MCP with the vertical speed mode. And the aim is to have a constant, smooth, continuous approach all the way down to the runway. Finally, the runway itself is actually really short and narrow. So what we want to do is land at flaps 40 and auto brakes 3. And probably have to use reverse thrust as well. Okay, so now that we've discussed the approach and had a look at everything, let's go and do it. Right, so we have started our descent. We've sort of done an approach briefing. I've shown you the chart and the approach we're gonna fly. Weather today is actually really nice. Visibility is a bit low, but it's nothing to worry about. There's practically no cloud, very little wind. Wind is 240 at 5. So yeah, this should be good. It should be very good. In case you are wondering, I'm sitting in the PMDG 737-800, and outside you see Orbac's New Zealand scenery. I've got both the North and South Island. We are of course on the South Island now. and we'll be flying into orb access Queenstown scenery, which is pretty nice actually. So yeah, should be good visually and challenging. So let's see how we do. Okay, as we descend further, let me quickly show you what I've done here. If you look at the MCDU, go into the legs page and the next page, you see I have actually typed in all the speeds I want to be at together with the altitude restrictions, and using the data button I've actually brought up that information here so we can follow that without having to look at the chart itself, although I do have the chart in front of me as well. So if you look here at ATWP again, 160 knots at 6,700 feet. Transition altitude in New Zealand is 13,000 feet. Okay, we're at 10,000 feet. Time for the approach check. Altimeter is set. Landing lights on. FMS arrival and approach is verified. Radios set. Auto brakes, we'll put them on 3. Approach aids are all set and the seatbelt signs are on. Okay, approach check complete. Okay, so we are approaching Atkill, which is the first point on the approach chart. We are at 10,000 feet, 180 knots, flaps 5. So as we can see here, the next altitude is 8,600 feet. This is going to be a step descent because we'll actually have to hold that altitude for a while, and we're going to use that level flight to slow us down to 160 knots. So next altitude is 8,600, and yeah, let's just flight level change for the time being. Okay, we are down, and now we'll put speed 160, gear down, and flaps 15. Next altitude is 7,500. Go to vertical speed. And put the arc slightly behind the waypoint. About right, so 800 feet per minute should do us fine, I think. There we are, we're turning. Next altitude is 6,700. There we are. Since we're not changing the speed and the wind is very constant, we can pretty much leave it at 800 feet per minute, and this should work until we slow down further. Now in the real world, this would be done slightly different. What would happen is the pilot flying will change the altitude on the MCP. So there's the turn, put in 5,100. He would then say 5,100 set, the pilot monitoring would cross-check and reply with check. There we are, so there's the valley that we're flying into. If you look over there, you can actually see the airport. So we'll be flying down into this valley and then round about there and then touchdown. Let's not get too high above the flight profile. Okay, next altitude is 4,200. Going to increase the rate of descent. There's actually a lookout over there. I've been there in the real world, where you can stand and watch the aircraft fly by. You're actually standing above the aircraft, which is pretty neat. So you can take pictures of aircraft flying by underneath you with stunning scenery in the background. 3-3. Okay, so at this point we'll slow down. 125, flaps 30, and flaps 40. Okay, and this is the last waypoint with an altitude restriction, so after this it's all manual from here really. Okay, autopilot's coming off. And auto throttle is coming off. I have control. Runway in sight. Okay, gear down, 3 green.
Caution, terrain.
We'll arm the speed brakes. Flap set, landing light set, cabin secure, landing checks complete. Getting a bit slow here.
Terrain, terrain. Pull up.
I've never flown into Queenstown as a passenger. It must be pretty cool. I've flown into Innsbruck a couple of times and there's sort of similarities. So I would imagine this is fairly similar. Right, let's see how I'm doing here. I have to tell you, I'm not very good at landing in the simulator. I'm pretty confident with real aircraft. I just find them a lot easier than simulated aircraft. Not sure why that is. To me they always seem a lot more stable and just seem to be doing what I want them to do. While here I usually fight the aircraft all the way down. But yeah, I guess we'll be hitting the runway. At least it looks like it.
400.
Pitch control on these simulators is so sensitive compared to the real aircraft. But
300.
I think we'll make it. It's not going to be the prettiest of landings.
200. 100. 50. 40. 30. 20. 10.
Whoa, okay. Reverse thrust. And there we are. Oh, what a shame. The real guys usually manage without backtracking. Oh well. Switch that off. So we'll just have to go to the end of the runway, turn around, and then park up. Okay, we've turned the aircraft around, and we'll be taxiing it to the gate now. Not sure if there's any point in showing you any of that. It's not very interesting. Really, the interesting bit is the approach, which I really enjoy, even though I'm not that good at it. But yeah, that's the thing with the simulator. It's a very good training tool, but it just feels and behaves quite differently to real aircraft. But anyway, you can do stuff you wouldn't be able to do in the real world, just like flying into Queenstown, which is why once in a while I really enjoy doing this kind of things. Okay, so here we are. I see there's a New Zealand A320, actually two of them. So let's see where we find some parking, and then we'll leave it at that. So I don't know if you enjoyed that. If you did, then maybe we can do something else like this again. Like I said, I'm not a pro at FSX, but I do try to dabble with it once in a while and do stuff that I couldn't do in the real world. And that's really what I'm doing here, having fun and enjoying myself. Okay, well, whatever you do, have a good day and safe landings.